As we discussed in video 5, stress responses vary from person to person and from situation to situation. Recognizing and naming the signs of dysregulation in both children and ourselves helps us to be intentional in the strategies we use to calm ourselves and connect with the child in ways that might be more effective in restoring their sense of calm and safety. In the case of children and youth, we can view some of these signs as messages they send us to let us know their lid is flipped. They are dysregulated, and the downstairs brain is focused on managing a perceived or real threat to their emotional or physical safety. Our general understanding of how the brain works and the stages of brain development can help us understand the messages a child is sending. Deciphering these messages is not always easy to do in the heat of the moment and depending on where we are on that stress ladder. When we see challenging, concerning, or unwanted behaviors in children, it is really important to do our best to pause, remain calm and in our upstairs brain, and ask ourselves, is what we're seeing and hearing an intentional misbehavior originating in the upstairs brain? Or is the behavior originating in the downstairs brain, an automatic, involuntary response to a perceived or real threat to the child's emotional, psychological, or physical safety? Neuroscience tells us that while most children are able to have some control of their attention, impulses, and behaviors by 3.5 to 4 years of age, it can take many more years for these abilities to fully develop. Before any of us develop effective and efficient thinking skills in our upstairs brain, we rely solely on the downstairs brain. These automatic responses do not involve conscious thought or planning. All children exhibit undesirable behaviors at times, and the science tells us that undesirable behaviors happen most often when children are stressed, and that deliberate misbehavior is rare. The stress behavior we are seeing indicates the child is overwhelmed and needs the support of a calm parent or caring adult to work through that overwhelm and to develop and strengthen age and stage appropriate regulation skills. Let's take a few minutes to consider a scenario that can take place at home or at school. We have a student who appears to be refusing to complete an assignment or do their homework. The behaviors we see will depend on age and environment, but might include having one's head down on the desk or table, sleeping at the desk, not using words or being unresponsive, perhaps staring into space, some tears or crying, rumbling under the breath, fidgety, refusing help or support. We may even hear complaints of not feeling well, stomach aches, and headaches. If we conclude that refusing to do an assignment or homework is intentional misbehavior originating in the upstairs brain, we might attribute that behavior to the child being oppositional. Or perhaps we view this child as lazy or irresponsible. We might assume the child doesn't care about education. This line of thinking is likely to leave the adult feeling agitated and frustrated. This may lead to a punitive approach to dealing with this situation. At home, you might respond by taking away privileges like screen time or playtime, or for the older kids, you might take away the keys to the car. In the classroom, this may result in several unwanted cues to get back on track, or the child might be asked to visit the office and return when they can engage in their work. Given the brain science, an alternative and more likely explanation is that the student is feeling stressed. They have flipped their lid. They've moved down the rungs of the stress ladder, and their upstairs brain is currently offline. Behind the stress behavior is a perceived or real threat. Perhaps the child is finding the task too difficult and is completely overwhelmed. They're not sure what to do, and they don't want to ask for help. The situation is made worse by the student's past experiences with asking for help, where they were told to keep at it or try harder. These experiences have led the student to believe they're not capable. This leads to feelings of anger or embarrassment, a threat to their emotional safety, triggering the stress response. It could be that the student is often compared to a sibling that is excelling at school, or perhaps being compared to friends or peers, and often hears about these comparisons. Again, this is a threat to emotional safety. Feeling less capable, competent, lacking confidence, and feeling that they're not being supported may lead to anger, embarrassment, or even shame and a complete shutdown. It might be that the student is struggling with lack of sleep or hunger. When these basic human needs go unmet, the stress response can be activated, leaving the child unable to focus. Quoting Dr. Siegel, "In these difficult moments, the child is not giving us a hard time, rather they're having a hard time." During these challenging situations, children of any age need adults to connect with them in ways that calm the stress response and helps them to return to the top of the ladder where they can access the upstairs brain to have a conversation with the adults about what is behind the stress behavior. This approach allows us to work with the child to create a plan to manage that trigger and receive the support needed to begin to build and strengthen those age and stage appropriate regulation skills. It's important to note and keep in mind that not all stress is bad. Low levels of stress for brief periods of time is not only healthy, but it is necessary as it can motivate us. It helps us to focus on a task and take action. An example of healthy stress is what we call a positive stress response. For children, this brief response might be experienced on the first day of school, perhaps when they're meeting new people, trying a new activity, or they're at a job interview. All of these situations may generate some nerves, some butterflies that cause a bit of a stomach ache. For younger children, we may see some hesitation, perhaps a few tears. There is some discomfort, but once the child engages, the stress dissipates and the child is able to continue in that experience.